Hi, this is Len Edgerly for the Kindle Chronicles podcast. Today is January 24th, 2023. I'm recording in Sanibel, Florida. I am bringing you a conversation I had last week with my grandson James, who is 16 years old. He's a junior at a high school in the Metro Boston area. I had an extra Kindle Scribe, and so I gave it to James thinking it might be of use for him at school. And after he had a chance to use it for a week or two, we had a conversation about it, and he told me some of the things he likes about it, some of the things he wasn't so thrilled about, how it compares with an iPad, and then got an update on some of his extra school activities, which are interesting, especially in the political area. And also asked him about Chat GPT. I think you'll find his comments about that pretty interesting. Here is my conversation with my grandson James. You've used the Scribe in school. What kinds of things have you used it for?
I've used it mainly for chemistry class, and it's been particularly useful to use the notes feature
Uh
of
huh.
the Scribe, and I can write chemical equations and different notes. I actually have it right here, so I
Yeah.
can show you a picture of what my notes look like. But
Be-
I find it easier than a notebook because it saves paper,
uh
and I believe in sustainability.
huh. That's right. That's a plus. So, because chemical formulas, they're hard to type. You have to actually write them out longhand is the best way to put them down. Wow, look at that. Huh.
Yes, so it's definitely easier to write them out on paper, but I find it that it's easier to be organized with the Kindle Scribe, especially with the highlighting feature,
Uh-huh.
and you don't have to worry about bringing a pencil to school every day. So I
Yeah.
appreciate that about it.
And are you using it to take notes right during a class?
Yes, I'm using it to take notes during classes, and sometimes I go back in my notes. Sometimes I use them to complete practice problems from the textbook.
Have you sent the notes from the scribe to yourself by email so you can print them out, or what do you do once you have the note?
No, I have not done that. I have usually just kept them on the scribe
Hmm.
itself.
Did you create some folders so that you'd have something just for your chemistry notes, and then if you were taking different kinds of notes, you'd put them somewhere else?
No, I have not yet. I've just kind of kept it in one long stream of pages, but I believe that when my notes get longer, I will organize it into folders. And right now, I just have the document as chemistry 2022 to 2023 notes.
Have you read any of your Kindle books on it to see what that's like?
No, I've not. I found it easier to read the Kindle books on a smaller screen.
Hmm.
And originally, I thought that it would be useful for something we do in school called active reading, where you can underline the text and kind of write comments in the margins. But when you do it on the Kindle Scribe, you have to write a sticky note
Yeah.
instead of actually writing it in the margins. So, in a future version, I would appreciate if you could write directly on the page because then I could submit that for future classes I have.
Yeah, me too. I think that's, I mean, the sticky notes I've had fun experimenting with, but I have that same desire to be able to just write kind of in the margins of a book the way I used to with, paper books. It can do that kind of annotating on a PDF. Have you had anything that you've sent to the scribe that you received in school as a PDF that you tried to annotate?
No, I've not done that yet, but I will definitely try it out. I wasn't completely aware of that feature.
Yeah, and the key thing there is if you go into the Manager Kindle content and devices, there's an email that's set up for your scribe, and you can change it. Like I changed mine to lenscribe@kindle.com, and then if you have a PDF, you just include the PDF in an email and send it to the email address that ends up on your scribe.
Okay.
And then that's kind of cool because then you can write actually on the PDF, and then you can save it, and then you've Like I've used it, a friend of mine's sent me a manuscript of a play she's writing. So I just did a bunch of marks on the PDF and then I sent it back to her so she could see what my comments were on the PDF. But it'd be nice if you could do
Okay.
that on a Kindle book. I think that would be really cool.
Yes, I
Any
agree.
other things about it that you think would make it more useful for people in a school situation?
Yes, I believe that it has an issue with erasing. When you erase content on the notes, you have to flip a page to get it to fully erase because you can still see the remnants of the text that were still there. I also believe that the design of the cover is kind of flimsy, and I like how it is very sleek,
Hmm.
but sometimes I feel like it's not attached well enough to it and it falls off.
Yeah, because it's got
And
that magnetic
yes,
attachment, which sometimes you can inadvertently knock it off when you don't mean to.
yes.
Yeah,
And I think besides that, one thing I do appreciate is that the pencil does not need to be charged.
right.
And I like that feature of it of just kind of having something that's normal and more like a pencil rather than like an Apple Pencil, which I think I would be more afraid to damage or use. And I think it's easier to write with, especially the tip of it feels like a real pencil.
Yeah. Have you done any writing with an Apple Pencil on an iPad to compare what it's like with the Scribe?
I believe I have in the past, and I feel like my writing on the Scribe has been neater than it has been on the iPad.
Yeah. Have you done any, like one thing I'm doing on it is I wasn't journaling for quite a while, and so now I'm doing a longhand journal each day in the morning and the evening on the Scribe, just because I like playing with it. But have you done any kind of longhand writing for essays or anything like journaling in addition to your chemistry work?
No, I tend to just do that on Google Docs because it is difficult to write longhand for that long. I find it's easier for taking quick notes, especially in a lecture. But when I want to write essays or something like that, I find that I'm a much faster typer and
Right.
it's easier on the hand.
Yeah, yeah, that's for sure. My hand starts tingling, and then I have to sort of shake it to go on. And uh, how has anyone else at school had a Scribe, or what kind of reaction have you had when you have it at school?
Really no reaction
Yeah.
whatsoever. I think that they assume that it's some kind of Apple
Ah,
device or iPad because many students use Apple iPads at school. And I would have to say, despite all the good features of the Scribe, I still feel like it is inferior to the Apple iPad just because it's more developed
yeah.
and it's easier to use. I feel like because it feels more like an iPhone that's
Hmm.
bigger that you can write with, it makes more sense. And there could also be a little bit of lag with Kindles in general, but
Hmm.
it makes them nice for reading, I
Hmm.
believe. But when you're actually taking serious notes and organizing, I find that the Apple iPad is easier to use. But I do really prefer the pencil of the Kindle Scribe, and I would appreciate if Apple could incorporate a pencil more like that.
Yeah, I heard one person listening to the podcast said that there's something that you can put on the end of an Apple Pencil that makes it feel more like the Scribe's pen. I haven't had a chance to try it yet, but that would be
Hmm.
kind of interesting because that would be sort of the best of both worlds if it really worked.
Yes,
Um,
it would.
have you used notes in on the iPad when you were using the Apple Pencil a while ago?
I actually have not had an Apple iPad. I've only tried other people's out,
Hmm.
but I was happy to use the Kindle Scribe
Yeah,
for just this very simple purpose of writing notes. And I believe that I can also use it reading if I don't have my Kindle with me,
right.
or I or if I'm reading a book where I want to take notes in a different way.
Yeah, I'll be interested if you see any benefit to the sticky notes because I didn't like it at first. And one thing I'm doing is when I'm reading, it pulls up just like a little note. And if I'm writing longhand about something I'm reading, even like writing down a quote that I think is important, the physical act of writing the quote down in this little window, it's almost like a combination of reading and writing that gives more space to me than I'd actually have if I was annotating in the margins of a book. But it's sort of an acquired taste. I don't know if I'm just sort of talking myself into liking it because I'm like you. I really would prefer to be able to at least have the choice to annotate on the page the way I used to in a book when I was, marking up all my paper books.
That makes sense, and I wonder if they will eventually incorporate that feature. I don't know if it's something to do with copyright of writing on a book that way,
I
but
wondered that too. One reason I think it isn't is because there's another e-reader, Kobo, and they sell books the way Amazon does. And on a Kobo reader, you can annotate the book that you're buying from, any of the big five publishers. So if Kobo could get, the okay to do that, I don't know why Amazon wouldn't be able to. I think they just rushed it out. They wanted to sell them, in time for Christmas, and they got the hardware pretty good, I think. And they were sort of hinting to me that they would be updating the UI pretty quickly, and they've got some of these other products like the Remarkable too that is really much better in terms of you can cut and paste, you can send it to a folder on your computer, and
Mhm.
I think they'll probably be trying to update it. Uh, Hey,
Yeah.
on another topic, I was listening to a podcast yesterday. It's called Hard Fork. It's a New York Times podcast about technology, and they were talking about Generation Z, which I think is what you are, and they were calling them Zoomers. Is that common usage to, because I'm a boomer, are you a Zoomer?
No, I don't believe that that term is usually used, just Generation Z, but
I see.
that's a interesting term.
Yeah, it's the first time I'd heard it. I don't know if it's going to catch on or and if so, and if you're doing something generationally challenging to me, I'll just say, okay, Zoomer,
Okay, yeah.
and you can say, okay, Boomer. Uh, well, you've got some interesting things going. Are you going to be doing another one of the kind of UN related things anytime soon, or?
Yes, I will be attending Harvard Model United Nations representing Sudan
Uh-huh.
with students from my high school, and that will be occurring, I believe, in January. And then I will be going to something related to the Junior Statesmen of America, and I will be attending Winter Congress in Washington, D.C. So those
Wow.
are two political or global events I have on the horizon.
The Winter Congress, will you be representing a certain state in kind of a congressional setting?
No, the Winter Congress is more about debating certain issues. So
Uh-huh.
there's an issue given, and then there is a pro speaker or a con speaker.
Yeah.
But I wonder if the format could look different. That was the format for Fall Congress, but I'm going to learn more information about what Winter Congress will look like.
Now, the other kids from your school, will you all be collectively representing Sudan in the thing at Harvard?
Yes, we will.
And there's a lot of military conflict still in Sudan, right? The
Yes,
Civil
that
War?
is true. No, I do not believe there is a war at the moment, but there is a lot of violence. The Sudan separated,
Right,
or
South
South
Sudan.
Sudan separated from Sudan
Uh-huh.
a couple of years ago, and South Sudan is a majority Christian kind of nation, whereas Sudan is majority Muslim. And the topic of the Model United Nations at Harvard. For my specific committee in the General Assembly, I'm on the Economic and Finance Committee, I believe. And the topic is about the global impact of sanctions. And
Uh,
and I'm taking the opposing position to it. And even though that Sudan is not sanctioned by many nations anymore, and South Sudan is, I believe that Sudan wanting South Sudan to be sanctioned does not mean that Sudan approves of sanctions in general,
huh.
because sanctions have been used in the past to harm Sudan and its economic growth by
Oh.
countries like the UK and the US, etc.
Does South Sudan have a delegation to the UN now?
I believe, yes, South Sudan is recognized in the UN.
Huh. Interesting. Will you be taking your scribe to those events, do you think?
Yes, possibly, but I believe Harvard will also provide notebooks for us to use.
Yeah.
So it will depend. It's also a valuable piece of equipment that I would not want to get stolen.
Yeah, that's right. Good. Well, that's very helpful and interesting. Any other thoughts about the scribe or that we didn't talk about that you want to mention?
Well, I believe that this is a great start to the Kindle Scribe, and I think specifically how the pencil is shaped. I think that eventually, once the Kindle Scribe is able to directly edit books, like we talked about by underlining and highlighting, I can see that it could be kind of a competitor to the Apple iPad that has these same capabilities of kind of using the pencil to take notes, etc. But I believe right now, I think that I personally would prefer the Apple iPad, but I find the Scribe helpful for just general notes, kind of just as an electronic piece of paper. And that's what I've been using it as. And it's been very helpful rather than carrying around notebooks with me. And again, the sustainability aspect
Yeah,
of it.
I hadn't thought of that, surprisingly, but that's an obvious that if technology like this cuts down on the use of paper, that's a plus.
Definitely, yes.
Have you played around at all with ChatGPT, the language model that kind of can answer questions that sound almost like a human is doing it?
Yes, I personally have not, but I've seen some people around me using it to cheat on various homework assignments or
Really,
essays.
already?
Oh, yes, of course.
Like writing an essay that had been assigned, or?
Yes, or people across different school districts and people that I've seen use it. So I believe it's becoming popular in the realm of cheating.
Well, in my day, we used Cliff Notes to do that. There were these summaries of the classics books that we were supposed to be reading, and say, "Here's an answer for an essay question that they might ask you." And the
Um,
the teachers got pretty good at figuring out whose responses were coming from Cliff Notes as opposed to who had actually read the book.
of course.
Maybe a little harder to figure out who's using ChatGPT or not.
Well, I believe that it still has that kind of robotic tone
Yeah,
to it.
it does.
And there's also websites where teachers can paste in essays to see if they've been altered by ChatGPT. But I think that students are trying to edit the essays written by ChatGPT so those censors can't detect that they're written by ChatGPT in the first place.
This is like spy versus spy or cat and mouse. Both sides are escalating their abilities to outwit the other.
Yes, of course.
Hmm. That's it for this week's episode. The next episode of the podcast is going to be sometime after February 1st because that's the day that I am going to speak with Chris Bailey about his new book, How to Calm Your Mind. I've been reading it carefully and I've talked about it in some other media. I did a YouTube video in which I was talking about why I've loved using sticky notes, which kind of surprised me. And as an example, I used something that I highlighted and then created a sticky note on in Chris's book. So that's next. And then I've also got an interview with Jerry Riddle coming up, A.G. Riddle, about his book. And you never know. There'll be other ideas. And keep watching and listening to the space. I really appreciate your taking the time to listen to my podcast.